This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I've got the beautiful Tiahna and her baby, Delilah, who's only about 7 weeks old. So we'll probably hear some little baby noises, although she looks pretty settled right now. Tiahna's going to tell us a story and we'll see what we can learn from this one. Thanks, Tiahna. Go ahead.
So our journey to our birth was a bit of an interesting one, with lots of monitoring that was required from about 28 weeks after I got hit in the belly with a pole at work. Oh, wow. We started recognising that she was growing a little bit small. My fundal height was quite low and was measuring 2 to 3 weeks behind at each midwife visit. So we started having fortnightly growth scans from 34 weeks. And little Delilah here decided to be Breech. Wow. So her head was very close to my heart for pretty much the entirety of our last trimester. And we had hoped that we'd be able to spin her so that I could have a vaginal delivery. But to add another thing into it, I had quite low amniotic fluid levels. Right. So at 36 weeks, we went in for our routine growth scan to see how she was tracking. And she was small, but nothing to be worried about really at that point in time. But again, the amniotic fluid levels were kind of reducing again and again. And as a result of that, we had begun to have reduced fetal movements as well. So went back into the hospital the following day for monitoring. And at that day, we had a doctor confirm with us that they wouldn't be able to attempt any form of ECD because it wasn't safe for her, it wasn't safe for me, and the complications that could arise were just not worth it. Which was, interesting enough, the day before we were due to do our Transform Your Birth course. So we had to adjust pretty quickly to expecting a spontaneous labour and vaginal delivery to a planned caesarean, which was not something that I had expected and not something that I was looking forward to. I was really keen for the challenge of labour and a vaginal delivery to see how my body would cope, how my mind would cope. I had a lot of faith in myself and had done a lot of preparation for that. So because of the low size, the low fluid, and her fetal movements, we continued with weekly monitoring and with a booked in caesarean date at 39 weeks. But at 38 weeks, we went in for our growth scan and she dropped down to the 7th percentile. Wow. And again, had reduced movements when we were on the monitor. So the doctor at that point said, no, this baby's going to come today. So we had a little bit of spontaneity in there, which worked well for me to be able to find the middle ground between knowing the date versus having no idea. Yeah. So the call was made at about 12:30 and at 4:30 that afternoon, she was born.
Beautiful. So I'm going to ask more about the caesarean because I think it's important people understand that that is another birth option. It's a very important option for a lot of babies. And when preparing for birth, we always have to be open to the idea that we might need to go down that path. Now, but before we go there, just talk a little bit about your mind, your mindset at that point where you've kind of gone through this process of having faith in yourself, wanting a vaginal birth, and then discovering that actually this is going to go a whole different direction. What was it about? How were you able to recalibrate your mind to that new path?
It was hard. It was probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do mentally in the past 12 months. And fortunately, I had you in my corner there, and I'm really grateful for the Caesar preparation that we were able to do with yourself. because I felt that I had failed originally. That was where I had started, was that I'd grown this beautiful baby and I wasn't going to be able to deliver her the way I wanted. I've now come around to that school of thought that it's not about what we want, it's about what baby wants, and they'll come into the world they want to.
Where do you think that idea came from, that you thought you'd failed? Tell me more about that.
My whole life, I have looked forward to having children and being able to experience the what I believe is just the wonder of giving birth. And I think we hear so much about birth being only vaginal, and that caesareans are a last resort. The narrative is definitely changing the last, I would say, maybe 5 to 10 years, about it being the easy way out. I say in quotation marks because it's definitely not. I've been through a lot with my body. I'm a very sporty person, had quite a few injuries, and I've always overcome, and I felt I've overcome it. So I was looking forward to that challenge. So to not even be able to face the challenge, I think I had just gone, oh, well, this isn't right for me. But
what do you think that situation, Tiahna, was inviting you to learn?
That planning doesn't matter, and that it's okay to go with the flow, and that no matter the end result, the way that you get to that end result, I should say, the journey is all part of the learning. And once you've got your bub in the world, nothing else matters. And I had a lot of trouble in the week after the doctor had confirmed the caesarean. And in my mind, I've always called it a planned caesarean rather than elective. And I don't particularly like the language of elective. For some people, it is a choice, but in our situation, it wasn't. And we planned 100% to have this baby right from conception through to birth. But it wasn't a choice of ours necessarily for her to come as a caesarean bub. And so I did a lot of work about changing that mindset of it's health. It's all about health. It's all about my health and her health. And it doesn't matter how. And no matter how many times I did say that to myself in the 2 or so weeks leading up from the booked confirmation, you kind of roll your eyes at it. You go, healthy mum, healthy bub, that's what matters. But you're still, in your heart of hearts, what you had wanted. So the hardest moment for me in that process was when I got the phone call from the hospital confirming the date. I've never had a panic attack until that day, which was quite scary. And I managed to, with the help of a friend over messages, just calm myself down. So that was the first thing I found really beneficial, was having people to lean on and to talk to, and who understood, who'd been through the process, that sometimes it's not what you want, but it's what you need. The second thing that really helped me was a guided meditation that you were able to run us through, both in person, and then again I used it a few times through the online portal, to recognize where I did have barriers in my thinking. Originally I just thought it was the knowledge of the date. I'd always been so excited for a spontaneous labor and what's happening and that sort of thing, but it came down to the moment that I handed my body and my baby to the medical professionals. So sitting on the edge of the table, ready for that spinal to go in both, every time I did the guided meditation, that was my trigger to feel quite upset. And again, that was the one time that I had a bit of an overwhelming moment in the procedure as well. So that moment of handing everything over, I think it was scary. And I imagine that there are moments similar to that through a vaginal birth as well. I'm not sure if I've lost you.
No, you haven't.
You've just frozen there, sorry. You can still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. What was I saying? Sorry. Okay, good. I've forgotten where I was up to now. Sorry.
The moment of the spinal going in and the overwhelm attached to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So I imagine in a vaginal birth, you have that same moment of, oh, okay, well, it's happening. I have no control over this anymore, but it's just going to be what it is. But ultimately, I found that even to this day, I cannot believe the sense of it doesn't matter that came out of my body the minute that I saw her. And all of a sudden, all of the emotions I'd been feeling over the 2 weeks leading in, nothing mattered anymore because my beautiful little human was in the world. And I can understand how everyone says, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. But I think the most important thing is no matter what type of birth you're expecting or planning, whether it is you're booked in for a caesarean or you're hoping for the vaginal delivery, it's about recognizing the emotions, and it's okay to feel every single emotion that you feel, because there's power in that. I always say that, if you're feeling nervous, it means you care. If you're feeling scared, it means you care. If you're upset, it means you care. And our emotions are so powerful in those moments, and we can learn a lot about ourselves when we can reflect on them.
Oh God, I just love what you've said there. That is so, so true. I often say in my classes, it's not the type of birth that matters. It's what gets activated in the mother. And the activation of the mother is the most important part of the readiness to meet your baby. And you can get activated, just like you described there, of having to overcome, having to go through the hardness of, this is not what I wanted, feeling like a failure. Now this is my path. The struggle, even in the lead up to that particular moment, till the point where you met her, and then the surrender happened. Pardon me. And birth is the ultimate surrender. It's the ultimate surrender to what is. And when babies land, Tiahna, they don't want you to, they're not sitting there going, geez, Mum, you didn't have a natural birth. Sucks to be you. How you could have done that better. They just want to land, and they want a mother ready to meet their needs. And the whole emotional, what you described so beautifully, that emotional acceptance of the rawness that is inherent in the process of becoming that mother tiger. You absolutely got activated in that, because when she landed, you were like, oh my God, none of that matters anymore. This is what it's about. And so accepting all of those emotions that went with that journey, to me, sounds like the perfect labor. In some ways we can grieve what we missed out on, but when you look and when you scrape at that story, you can see that you had your labor. It was just a labor of the mind. It was a labor of the letting go process. It was a labor of acceptance. It was a labor of feeling those feelings and then watching them come through you and pass, and then feeling more feelings and watching them go through and pass. And then when she came, that realization of, oh, this is what it's about. It's about the welcoming of a human soul. Yeah. Oh gosh, what a great framing you've got. So tell me a little bit more about how that unfolded, and then your transition into motherhood.
So I did a lot of work from, like I said, finding out that we were booked in for it, to take it a bit away from this medical procedure that it was going to be, right? Because it's a surgery, it's a major surgery. And I mean, I'm no stranger to an operating theatre, so that was not something I was worried about. But how did I turn this sterile environment to something that is still what I could have had in a labour room? So I listened to pretty much every caesarean birth story I could find on the Australian Birth Stories podcast, to learn a little bit more about gentle caesareans and the options I had available to me. And my midwife was so supportive in that as well. So I'm very, very grateful that I had her. And we were able to put preferences together, and majority of which were able to be executed to turn this sterile theatre room into our beautiful birthing room. So we were able to have, I was able to have my own playlist playing, which was very powerful for me in moments of overwhelm and what's going to happen next. And I made an effort to ask the doctors to be as gentle as they could as with her birth. So if she was able to be born head first, to be able to leave her half in, half out, to allow for as long of a delayed cord clamping as possible. But unfortunately, the health of where she was at when she was born meant that she was sort of straight out and straight onto the resus tray to be looked after. Then it was the biggest thing for me was just the mental side of it, and taking as much control over something that I had no control over that I possibly could.
Did you find your caregivers were very supportive of that?
They were, particularly my midwife was absolutely amazing. So I had a lead midwife, and then I had a student midwife as well, who was just stoked to be there, really. I had asked about vaginal swabbing or seeding so that she could still get all the microflora and stuff from my body. And my midwife was so excited when I asked her about it. She's like, yes, we can definitely do that. And she was with me literally every step of the way. And I heard her voice nonstop through the procedure, which just was beyond anything I could ask for. Wow. The doctor that I had on the day as well, the surgeon that performed her birth, was also really supportive of everything and was so gentle in her delivery, which was unfortunately something that I didn't have with the very first doctor to confirm that we were going down the route of a caesarean. So I think everyone was just really excited to be able to birth my baby. And we didn't know the gender at the time. And so they were also all really, really supportive of that exciting moment of, what is it? And my husband got to announce her gender, which was a massive surprise because we were convinced she was going to be a boy. And out comes this little girl. So, the feeling in the room was amazing. Despite there being like 15 people in this tiny theatre room, including myself and my husband, everyone had such faith in the process. I knew everyone had their role and their responsibility, and that they were there for me and for my baby. And everyone was so accommodating to anything I asked. So at one point, I had no idea it's a very odd feeling having a spinal in, because you can feel, but you can't feel any pain. So the sensation's there, just no pain. And so at one point I did ask the anaesthetist what was going on. So he started to narrate the procedure for me, which I found very valuable in understanding the process of her coming into the world as well. So I felt very, very lucky, very supported, and it was everything I could have hoped for, and probably a little bit more, I think, which after expecting it to be the last thing I wanted on my list, I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yeah.
I love hearing how people can really, like, little things can make a big difference to a situation like that, which can feel very overwhelming because it's light, it's bright, and there can be a lot of people in that room. But I love the framing that you had around the people in there. They were all there for you. I always think it'd be a lot better to have 15 in there than one very nervous looking doctor.
Definitely.
Then you'd have more to worry about, I think. But that can be very overwhelming for women in that space. And I often say, if it is, to close your eyes and stay connected. I loved how your midwife really talked you through and allowed her voice to soothe you and to keep you connected to you and not to feel too overwhelmed by that. That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about how your partner experienced that whole process of, we're going down this path and now we're going down this path? What was it like for your partner?
He is very much a go with the flow. It has to happen, so it happens person. And ultimately, I think for him, he just wanted to be there for me to be okay. And however this baby came into the world for him, it was neither here nor there. It was more about how I got through the process, which was amazing. So supportive. So he was at work on the day. We got that level of spontaneity of, oh, yeah, now it's time for you to come to the hospital. This is all happening. And the moment that he arrived, he just was perfectly hovering. I think the hardest part was knowing that he couldn't be there during the spinal part happening when that anaesthetist was doing his thing. But the moment that he was in the room, he was right up next to me. We had a nice little chat. I can't believe how quickly it all happens. And then because Delilah was 2.5 kilos at birth, she had to go up to the special care nursery. So he was able to swaddle her up, bring her over to me so I could meet her. And we had a really sweet little moment as our first moment as a family, which was really nice. And then he was able to have the first hour and a half with her up in special care nursery with feeding her colostrum and having his skin to skin and that sort of thing. So for me, knowing that, like, it was enough to know that he was with her, he was with me, no matter where he needed to be, it's where he was. And if it was there to be silently holding my hand, that's where he was. If it was to be talking me down and through the breathing that I needed to make sure, he's such an observant person that he's able to recognize the moment that I start to get overwhelmed, and he would just bring me back to breathing and to the moment, which is, I suppose, 10 years of being together, you get to those points where you just know each other's tells in that respect. So I think for him, the process was much more about how he could be there for me, and he wasn't too fazed about what happened for him.
That's beautiful. Can you just let listeners know a little bit about your choice to have the vaginal swab and what that is? Now, just before you go into it, I'll just explain. One of the things that happens in a vaginal birth is that a baby is covered. We've got up to like 700 different species of microbes in our vagina, and the baby's covered in those microbes, which is that first sort of education of the baby's immune system about life outside the womb. And it's there to start to initiate that immune response by being in the world. And so one of the disadvantages about having a caesarean is not going through that pathway. But what we have discovered is that we can do what's called vaginal seeding and put in a vaginal swab in order to do that. Tell us how you came to that decision and what you did. Like, talk us through that process.
So it was something that I had heard through one of the multiple caesarean podcasts that I'd listened to. And I'm a health and PE teacher myself, so I have a pretty good understanding of anatomy and physiology and what the benefits are, like I said, of that vaginal birth. So it was important for me for her to be able to have that experience no matter how she came into the world. And the minute that I heard that was possible, I was like, right, that's happening. So we originally, if we were going to be traveling in for the planned date, the midwife had instructed us, I just had like 5 pieces of gauze, and just to insert them as just like you would a tampon into the vagina, up as far as you can towards the cervix, and to keep track of how many were there. And then once she was born, that would be removed by the midwife, and she would then be swabbed all over her face with the gauze. Now, because of the slightly adjusted planning, the midwife was the one that ended up inserting the gauze prior to us going down to pre-admission.
Yep.
And then post birth, she removed it, and while Delilah was on the resus little tray where they do all their measurements and stuff, she got nicely covered with all the gunk.
Ah, lovely. That's wonderful. Yeah. That's such a powerful decision making, because like you were alluding to earlier, you can feel like, oh, this is this is a failure, this is a second-rate birth, and it's not. There's so many things that we can do to make up for what gets lost in that process, and that's certainly one of them. I think your capacity to choose what was important to you, to communicate that to your lovely midwife, and then to have those conditions play out for you were just such a gift. It's one thing, and I'm so glad we've recorded this story, because it's really interesting. I tend to even avoid using the term natural birth now, because it just kind of alludes to this idea that that's the right way to do it and everything else is the wrong way to do it. But every birth is a unique journey of a human into the world, and I don't like to categorize birth, and I certainly don't like to put it into categories of good birth, bad birth, because it's the birth, it's the welcoming of a baby. That's ultimately what birth is. And it's not the doorway. It's what gets activated in the mother and what she learns about herself and the process as she becomes that new upgraded version of herself, which is the mother. So Tiahna, what did you learn about yourself going through all of that?
It's such a great question, and something that I've tried to reflect on as well. I think.
Hello, Delilah. She's up. I'll just translate what Delilah said. She just said, "Mum's a legend." That's what she. Just for those who didn't hear that.
I think what I've learned is that I am able to get through no matter what challenge is thrown at me, which is, again, something that I've really had to go through the past 24 months, just in my own personal life through a multitude of things. And that letting go of what you have a preconceived notion of having in your life, whether it be how you bring a baby into the world or when you want to buy a house or whatever it happens to be, can allow you a certain sort of freedom. Like I said, the moment that I saw her and all her hair and her long little limbs, nothing else mattered. And I knew that I had grown this beautiful human. She eventually made her first cry. So she was strong and healthy. And the moment that she was in the outside world and I was able to feed her in other ways rather than through the placenta, then she was thriving. And that, I mean, everyone tells you that the moment you meet your baby, nothing else matters anymore and your life changes and it's a love you've never understood. But until you go through it, you don't understand it. And I still don't understand it. And that for someone who has previously lived a very fast-paced life and needed to be out every evening playing sport or catching up with friends or doing extra work, whatever it happens to be, that it's so lovely to be able to just sit in the moment with your family and know that it's okay to slow down and just enjoy what's happening. So I think I've learned a lot about myself in where I find value, and it's becoming more and more about love rather than things. Yeah.
Well said, girl. Well said. That is it. It's all about love. And birth, you know, prior to a baby landing, mothers get these big surges of oxytocin. And yes, it happens when we have contractions. That's what fuels the contractions. But that can happen at any time, in any way, when we have the right sort of orientation towards the experience and recognizing what's important. So there's that oxytocin factor right there. It's just superb. I just absolutely have really appreciated what you've shared today, Tiahna. It's just golden because, we can get a little bit sort of caught up in the way we want birth to go and what type of birth we want. And that's not what this is about. Birth is the welcoming of a human soul It's not the type of birth that matters, it's what gets activated in you. Mother Nature wants you to be ready for that baby. And if we can create the right conditions for whatever birth a woman's experiencing, and allow her to be in the zone of that experience where she's completely inward focused and ready to see her baby for the first time, then the rest is just details, darling, isn't it? Just notes on a medical file rather than, you know, what it's about. It's actually about having a baby. So thank you so much. Can I just ask one final question? What would you say to a pregnant woman about birth?
No, I think the biggest thing that I'd love to impart on others is that it's about the baby and what the baby wants. Like I said, Delilah was breech, and we tried everything we could. I was upside down every evening. I was getting acupuncture. I was moxibustion. It was all the things, but that's where she wanted to stay. She wanted to come into the world the way she wanted to come into the world. And nothing I could think or do was going to change that. So it's okay to surrender yourself to that. And babies are going to come into the world the way they plan, not the way you plan, unfortunately. So we have to do the most we can mentally to prepare ourselves for every type of birth that is possible, whether it's a planned caesarean when it's an emergency, whether it's a vaginal, whether it's a home birth or in the car on the side of the road on the way to the hospital. There's no way to fully prepare the ins and outs of it, but you can prepare your mind, and that is the most powerful thing, and that's something that you can take beyond birth as well. It's not just a one and done.
So true. And do you think that's part of what early parenting's about? You're 7 weeks in now. Can you make her sleep?
I have to say I'm pretty lucky. I can't make her sleep, but she'll go to sleep pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
We also just had our first super long stretch. She slept from midnight until 7 a.m. I woke up 3 times and was like staring at her in the bassinet to see if she was breathing.
Wow.
So, but yeah, you can't control. You just need to tune into what's going on, and again, surrender yourself to that. Exactly. But that surrender is such a surrender of love, and just there's nothing else you want to do apart from be attuned to your baby and know what they want and when they want it. And to be as calm in that process as you can be, because like you said, you can't make your baby do it. You can't force them into a routine. They dictate it, so just let it happen.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's what birth sets us up for too. It sets us up for the fact that we can't control our babies. They're going to cry when they're going to cry. They're going to, sleep when they're going to sleep. There's things we can learn. There's ways we can attune and pick up on their cues, and all of that's really important. But their rate of growth is so rapid that any type of routine is just completely irrelevant, because they're changing so quickly. And I can see the connections when I watch women go through that path of pregnancy and all the changes that happen then, and then the birth process, wherever that takes her in that world of mystery, and then this baby that they find themselves in love with, that they then have to work through that process, and it's all connected, all part of the wisdom of nature and that blueprint of creation. Thank you, my darling. That was just absolutely gold. And thank you for sharing such a great framing of birth under all circumstances.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's I'm a teacher myself, so all I want to do is help people learn and recognize that there's so many ways out there, and the most important thing is your bub.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.